Well, this gal is speaking to us about the steps to take when designing your landscape, whether hiring a professional or doing yourself. And Chris Hart-Henderson's been living, playing, and designing landscapes in Central Oregon since 1984. And she really knows her stuff. We've been working with her quite a bit to get ready for this. So at this point, I'm going to turn my screen over to Chris and to explain to our attendees so they know. Chris is having some flicker problems with her video on her home camera. Her slide presentation works fine, but we had her kill her video so that she wouldn't flick at everybody. And that's why you just see her name instead of her lovely face this morning. So, Chris, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you and I'm going to have you click on your green share button at the bottom of your screen. Talk to me, Chris.
I'm working on it. Here we go.
Okay, perfect.
Are we ready?
Well, I'm gonna walk you through this because you're not quite there yet. There's one more click to share.
Uh,
It should be a blue button.
got it.
There you go. I'm going to walk you through this. Okay, what I want you to do is go ahead and click on play your slideshow from beginning. Awesome. So I'm going to kill my video and my audio, Chris. And what you need to do is when you are ready for us to run your poll, just tell us to run your poll and Sarah will do that.
Okay, thanks, you guys. So I hope that you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Looks
Great.
good and sounds good.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Landscape Design, Where to Start. First, I want to thank my technical support team to get me to this point. Thanks, everyone behind the scenes. So if you've ever wondered what goes into designing a landscape, this webinar is for you. Today, I'm going to show you a step-by-step process that I use to design a landscape, and it's the same process many landscape design professionals use. Today's webinar is based on my own experience in Central Oregon. However, this process can be applied no matter where you live. As Vicki said, my name is Chris Hart-Henderson. I'm owner of Heart Springs Landscape Design, and I've been designing landscapes in Central Oregon for over 40 years. I focus on residential projects, from tiny yards to large rural estates. We will get to your questions at the end of this talk, but I do have a few questions for you before we get started. Host, will you please run the poll?
Chris, the poll is up, so you can go ahead and ask questions if you want to.
Are plants the first thing that comes to mind when you think of landscape design? Have you hired or worked with a landscape designer before? Have you brought plants home with no idea where to plant them?
They're answering the questions, and we are pretty close to 100% here. Just a couple more responses, Chris, and then Sarah, you can probably give it a few more minutes. Great job, attendees. Thank you. Okay, we're at 40 of 41.
Drum roll.
Yeah, go ahead. Sarah, go ahead and end it. Oh, somebody else came in. But go ahead and end the poll and publish it, please. And click on the, very good. Thank you.
Plants are not necessarily the first thing that comes to mind when you think of landscape design. And some of you have worked with a landscape designer before. That'll be fun to see if this is the process they used. And have you brought plants home with no idea where to plant them? Really? Some of you really have it together. Better than I am. Okay, great. Good to know. Thanks, Sarah. So, how do I know where to plant? Do I have a magic wand to go from this to this? I use an 8-step process. So when a trailer full of plants arrives at a job site, I know where they go. Each of these 8 steps builds on the one before. It works like this. The first step is to gather information. The information is used to draw a site plan. A site plan is a scaled map of what is existing. Think of it as a before photo for a makeover. The information and site plan provide the framework to create a concept. A concept gives you an idea or an approach to your landscaping that meets your needs while fixing what needs to be fixed on site. Once a concept is approved, it is time to develop the design so it can be installed. This typically includes several plans. Fully developed plans provide enough information to make a materials list. The materials list provides the information necessary to get an estimate. Once the estimate is accepted, the installer can schedule the install, and the final step is construction. Many designers will provide guidance during construction to make sure the intent of the design is achieved. There is no cheating this 8-step process because it is a logical progression where each step builds on and is necessary to go to the next step. I'm often asked, well, how much is this going to cost me when I haven't even started the design? In this talk, I will show you step by step how this works, as if you had hired a professional to design your landscape. That way, these steps will make more sense and will be easier to understand. Each step has actions to take or a checklist to complete before the next step can be started. You may be surprised how much each step involves. Step 1, gather information. When you hire a professional, they will interview you to find out what you need. In the interview process, you will likely complete a questionnaire. The questionnaire will help you identify your goals, which helps the designer understand the main motivators or issues you want them to deal with or fix in the design process. Once you complete the questionnaire and identify your goals, the designer will meet you on site. A completed questionnaire provides a lot of useful information. Who is part of the project? Are you working with an architect or a builder? What is the project? Is it new construction or a remodel? Or perhaps you had just purchased some property and you're thinking about where you might site your home. Where is it located? Is it in town? Is it in an HOA or out in a rural area? Are permits needed? Are there any requirements like HOA guidelines or design review approval? What's the timeline? Is it flexible? When will you need the design completed? Plan at least a year ahead of construction. Plan like you would for a big wedding. Your answers to these questions gives the designer a heads up on what to expect before they schedule a time to meet you on site and walk it together. The questionnaire asks you to identify your goals. The design is centered around your goals. A goal can outweigh an attachment to something like a paver color or a particular plant preference. For instance, if you want low maintenance and you install a dark colored paver, you will be forever cleaning Central Oregon dust off your pavers. Same goes for a lawn. You will forever mow it once a week. The local mantra goes, so much to do, so little time. Would you rather mow, hike, bike, or climb? We like our fun and adventure, With our short growing season, we look for ways to minimize maintenance. Are you going to mow the lawn or go have fun? Now, what are some other goals? Beautiful, inviting, and private outdoor spaces are important to us. It can feel overwhelming to think about the entire landscape and how to decorate it with plants, furnishings, lightings, and accessories. Break large spaces up into functional areas, like rooms. How will each room or area be used? Each room can have its own feel or vibe. This keeps the choices limited and simple. I have found that keeping things simple with repeating elements, colors, and shapes helps unify a space, which creates an inviting space for both view and use. An element of surprise is always fun. You can see this playful sculpture peeking out from the side of this photo. It reminds me of the fun, playful sculptures that are dancing around the roundabout at Powers Road. I realize these examples are a bit oversized for most of our yards. But go wild and express yourself in a way that captures your own spirit, creativity, or ingenuity. This photo shows examples of a fun sculpture, a pretty pot, a very cool gate, and my own little green homey nomi. Central Oregon is a very pet-friendly place. The majority of households here have at least one pet. Pets need space for play and containment, and so do kids. Wildfire is on our minds and in the news. Preparing for wildfire is now a part of life in Central Oregon. This photo was taken from my bedroom window in 2009 when I watched Black Butte burn. We are learning that none of us are immune to wildfire. The goal of Firewise landscaping has become our top priority. OSU Extension has excellent online resources for creating defensible space and fire-resistant plants for our area. We locals love entertainment areas with fire pits, dining and cooking areas. I like to think about how I want a space to function. Outside spaces close to a home can be designed as an extension to a specific room, like a kitchen, dining, or great room. You are just recreating the room function outside, but avoid my own mistake. This seemed like a good idea 25 years ago, but I'm not burning my wood-burning fire pit anymore. The City of Bend is promoting replacing lawns with low water use landscaping. The turf replacement rebate program is striving to reduce thirsty lawns. Why plant in the curbside planting strip when the lawn is only used as a place for dogs to poop? When you can have this beautiful option of deer-resistant, water-wise, and fire-wise plantings. The rebate program encourages us to plant diverse, native, drought-tolerant, fire-wise plantings that support pollinators. OSU Extension and the City of Bend both have free, excellent resources available on xeriscaping and water-wise landscaping in Central Oregon. The City of Bend is actually hosting a water-wise field day coming up on Saturday, June 14th, if you're interested. It goes from 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. It's been very popular, and it's held at Hollingshead Park in Bend. Growing food is often on our wish list. Raised beds provide a safe, climate-savvy way to grow vegetables to enjoy throughout the season. Pollinators are needed for growing food and pollinating flowers. Pollinators need our support more than ever to survive and thrive. The City of Bend has a list of plants that support pollinators. OSU Extension also has excellent free online resources for supporting pollinators in our area. You can tell I've been plugging both OSU Extension and the City of Bend a lot, but they deserve it. I've been here a long time and they have put an extraordinary amount of effort into creating these resources. They're a wonderful resource for all of us. Native plants support our native pollinators. Native plants are easy to grow and do not require as much water or care as most non-native plants. We discuss options for we discuss options for native plants that will meet your goals. Plant experience is invaluable when deciding what plants to use and why. This is a photo of a restoration project, and it shows just how quickly native plants and native seeds can establish themselves in just 6 months. Natives are superstars, especially on large natural restoration projects. Deer seem to live everywhere in Central Oregon. Deer-resistant plantings are a goal, especially if the landscape is not fenced. I will share one of my secrets. What is native, deer-proof, fireproof, doesn't need water, never outgrows a space, and is maintenance-free? I'm really liking the lichen and the big old boulders. These are awesome to incorporate into your landscape. They add both interest and a sense of place and history. The deer don't eat them, the fire doesn't burn them, and you don't have to add water. Another goal is to manage stormwater. Even in our high desert, it is essential to deal with drainage issues and to manage stormwater runoff from impervious surfaces like roofs and concrete driveways. In some areas of Central Oregon, the stormwater is required to be retained on site. The current requirement in Bend is a 24-hour, 100-year storm event, which is a little over 3 inches of rainfall in 24 hours. A 1-inch rainfall produces 0.0623 gallons of water per square foot of surface area. That means a modest 1,200 square foot home with a 2-car garage will yield about 1,000 gallons of water in a 1-inch rainstorm. In the same scenario, a 3-inch 100-year storm will produce about 3,000 gallons of water, which is enough to fill a 12-foot round, 4-foot deep swimming pool. This is definitely an issue that needs to be considered in the landscape design. If you think this is no big deal in Central Oregon, consider this. A 100-year storm event happened in Bend on December 31st, 2005. 3.41 inches of rain fell in a 24-hour period on top of frozen ground and over up to a foot of snow. Let's just say it made a really big mess. Identifying and prioritizing your goals early in the design process helps keep the focus on what's important to you. Whether your budget is big or small, being able to identify your top 3 goals and achieve them in the design and installation is a reason to celebrate. The top 3 goals are where most of your dollars are spent. With a completed questionnaire and identified goals, it is time to meet on site. This allows the designer to discuss your ideas with you on site with some idea of what you want to achieve. Walking the site together provides the opportunity to discuss the possibilities while considering your top 3 goals, your budget, and the challenges of the site. Perhaps you are wondering how to deal with steep slopes. Good access for equipment can save significant labor costs and shorten the length of time to install the project. The opposite is true without equipment access. Some installers rely on equipment. Without good equipment access, they simply do not have the labor force to install a project. Equipment Access is one of the first things I look for on a site. To give you an example, these steps were built before the home on a very steep site. There was literally nothing on this site when these steps were put in because there was no way to get access equipment for equipment after the home was built. Now is the time to discuss budget. Is the budget even in the ballpark for accomplishing what you want? Most people like me are big dreamers with tiny budgets. This is the time for some straight talk about what to expect for a budget so expectations can be met. Getting a handle on budget early in the process can seem daunting if you are not familiar with current prices in your local area. However, projects can be phased in over time, or the design can be simplified to fit your budget. All this preliminary step one information gathering, including identifying goals, walking the site, and discussing a ballpark budget, will help with a game plan that will achieve the results you desire. This game plan provides direction for the next step. All of that was step one. So much goes into gathering information. Step two, drawing a site plan. Remember earlier I mentioned the site plan is like the before photo in a makeover? It's an accurately scaled map of what is existing on site. So what's involved in drawing a site plan? These 8 items are used to create a site plan. We will go through each item. First, locate a site survey if one is available. I call this my cheater pants move because it saves me so much time and provides very accurate site information. Otherwise, I have to draw it from scratch. A site survey provides legal lot information, topography, contour lines, locations of trees, and proposed or actual building site and utility locations. The survey is used as a base map, and current site information is added to create a site plan. Notes are added, including existing conditions and elements that need to be considered during the design. Surveys with contours that indicate slopes and topography are especially helpful. For instance, I know from looking at this survey that it is a fairly level site, except the backyard, which has a steep cliff with a lower area next to a river. I can also see the side yards are narrow on both sides of the home. 5-foot side yards often have heat pumps or gas meters and utilities that create an even narrower space to fit equipment through. This limits equipment access to the backyard. Without equipment, the materials used for a landscape need to be portable by hand or wheelbarrow with limited weight and limited size. The designer will need to research site information that is going to affect the design layout, which could include fire-wise landscaping and defensible space, required permitting or HOA design guidelines, design review committee schedules, and approved plant lists. Another way to find property information is to download tax lot info or an aerial photo off Dial, Deschutes County Properties Information website. This information is useful when measuring the site, but before the site is measured, utility locates will be needed. It takes up to 3 business days for the utility companies to mark their locations, and it is a free service you sign up for before you start digging. I contact digsafelyoregon.com 3 or 4 business days before I plan on measuring the site. That way, I have the paint marks showing utility locations when I show up that I can add to the site plan when I am measuring. Now I know where to avoid trenching or planting large shade trees or digging for stormwater swales on the design. The utilities are shown by color. In this photo, you can see a planting strip along the sidewalk. There's 3 colors, orange, red, and yellow. And then you see blue stripes coming up and across the sidewalk. If you look over here on the right-hand side, you can see the color code, and this is very consistent. Red means power, yellow means gas, orange is communication, and blue is water. So now you know there's power, gas, and communication all going through this planting strip. So this is not an ideal place to plant shade trees. The water is entering the site where these blue arrows are showing entering this space right here, and there's likely a water meter hidden in these shrubs. A site measure is most accurate when laid out to scale while you're on site. I use a piece of 10 scale graph paper, a clipboard, and 100-foot and 200-foot tape. I will be noting elements that will impact the design. So, what elements are these that need to be identified and located? These photos show what elements are located on the site plan when measuring. You'll locate doors and windows and note their width. You'll locate differences in grades, slopes, and height between different areas. For instance, 2 exits at 2 different levels. So you can see this door is above existing grade outside. This is going to be important if you're going to be building a deck or have pavers. There will be steps or something going on here, so you need to know what that is. You'll be locating foundation vents. So there's a foundation vent back here that's got insulation, and another foundation here that has a foundation vent well around it, which protects the foundation vent if you need to raise the grade to make sure your water is running away from your home. You'll also be locating heat pumps or HVAC units, utilities like water. There's a little hose bib back here, gas meters, and then you'll need to think about space for trash and recycling. Usually an 8-foot long by 3-foot deep minimum space is needed. An enclosure is ideal to keep them from blowing over in high winds. I don't know if you experienced that, but I've picked up plenty of trash waiting for the garbage truck to arrive. Locate roof runoff areas as well as downspouts and rain chains if gutters exist. Where does snow slide off the roof, and where does it pile up? Are there drainage issues that need to be addressed? The designer will need to verify there is adequate water supply for landscaping needs. The water flow or available volume in GPMs or gallons per minute can be tested with a 5-gallon bucket and a stopwatch. Most residential 5/8 meters and main lines provide enough flow for an irrigation system that does not exceed 15 gallons per minute per zone or valve. The available static pressure, or PSI, will also need to be tested. I consider 45 to 60 PSI as ideal for most residential irrigation if it's pop-up. For drip irrigation, you can get by with as little as 35 to 40 PSI. Rural agricultural irrigation has completely different operational needs. Available water supply for rural projects is determined using well records and the amount of acres of irrigation water rights. For approximate general design, I use 7 gallons per minute for each acre of water right, but this varies widely depending on the type of water delivery and if it's a drought year. Next is photographing the site from many angles. When photographing the site, pay special attention to signs of wildlife. I will select plants that are responsive to regular wildlife visitors. For instance, I will suggest deer-resistant plants, plants that support pollinators, or flowers that attract hummingbirds and songbirds. Photographing the site slows me down and makes me pay attention to details I might otherwise overlook. The last item is this checklist. Once the site is measured and photographed, this checklist is used to make sure all the site elements that affect a design have been added to the site plan. Are trees and utilities located, including overhead power lines? This avoids planting tall trees underneath them. Check that slopes, low drainage points, and rocky or compacted soil is noted. Is there any shade on site? Do any of the views need to be screened? What direction is the wind blowing from? Now let's review what we have learned and draw a site plan on a real project. To demonstrate how this process works, let's use this simple small project in the before photos above. These photos show the tiny yard of a family of 4. The photo on the left shows a patio that is too small to accommodate dining, grilling, and their smoker. There is an overgrown shrub over here taking up valuable space. And then there's just this lawn that isn't really all that usable. The photo on the right shows the main view from this door out their back and from their existing patio. All they see is the neighbors' homes across the alley, even with this 6-foot fence, which helps some, but it's not really a space where this family wanted to hang out. This is what the site plan looks like. The tiny space is about the size of a 2-car garage. Utility locates did not show any underground utilities in the backyard. The items on the checklist are added to the plan. Take a look at the plan. The green circle with a T, like this little guy, those are tree trunks. The large green circles going around are the tree's drip lines, or where their branches and foliage extend. The blue color has to do with water. In this case, I'm noting that there's no gutters and water is pouring off the roof where I have this dashed blue line. And there's also a drainage problem off the existing patio. There's 2 doors. You can only see one in this drawing. There's a sliding door here, but there's also a door hiding over here that goes into the garage. They're at 2 different heights. If you think about it, most garages step up into the home. If these 2 doors are so close together and they're sharing a space, you're going to have to be able to make that transition somewhere. There's a leaning tree up here that's nice and mature, but it looks like it might be unstable. So an arborist is going to be needed to consult on whether it's stable or not and whether we can keep it. There's a mountain ash and an existing little pine that the owners just planted within the last year, but they're kind of out in the middle of the yard where we need space to do some other things. The mature tree in the lower right is a keeper, but there are lots of surface roots under this tree that we don't want to disturb. The family's goals are no lawn, privacy, dining. They want a fire pit. They really need some shade. They really like native plants, and they have a limited budget. The site plan is about current site conditions, including any challenges to meeting their identified goals. So the question is, what needs to happen to the existing site to support the goals? When the family describes how they feel about their backyard, it reveals their number one goal. In this case, the family felt like they were living in a fishbowl with all their neighbors looking down into their yard. Identifying this top challenge along with other limitations will inform the design layout. The project has limited access, limited budget, and limited space. The fence has a height restriction of 6 feet. 2 of the existing larger trees are mature, with roots within their drip line, and 1 is leaning. There's no protection from snow and rain at the door exits. Water pools at the low end of the existing cracked concrete patio. There's a large shrub that should be removed to create more usable space. How do you know how much space to provide to say a dining area? You figure the size of the table plus a 3-foot perimeter for chairs. If you think about it, hallways are 3 feet wide. Paths generally are at least 3 feet wide. So if you have circulation around an element, you need to provide 3 feet of width. If there is a path next to the space, add an additional 30 inches. You can use the dimensions of items and functional spaces inside the home, like a kitchen or dining area, to get an idea of how much space you will need outside the home. With the site plan information, known challenges, and identified goals, we are ready for the next step. Time to create a concept. In step 3, we create a concept with the intent to address the goals and fix the challenges of the existing site and the design. We know privacy is the top goal. Dining, cooking, fire pit, and shade will make it inviting. Native and evergreen plants will help screen the neighbors' homes. A structural privacy screen with a vine would also work, except the HOA did not allow structures attached to or directly above the fence. Adding gutters will control roof runoff and the drainage issues, so long as the downspouts are properly located. In this case, it will be installed into a side yard rain garden or bioswale. The leaning tree is in the photo above, right here. The arborist will let us know if it is worth keeping. The other smaller tree over here is the mountain ash that can be transplanted or moved during dormancy, meaning when it doesn't have leaves in November through March. Concept 1 is an initial idea of how the site can be altered to fix the challenges and meet the goals. The first concept is a simple approach with large flagstone sitting area, a fire pit, as the main focal point. The large overgrown shrub that was over here was removed to make room for the dining area. In this concept, it was assumed the leaning tree would be removed. So this would be gone and be replaced with the mountain ash. As the mountain ash grew, it would eventually provide some limited shade for the dining area and also screen the neighbors' homes when it had leaves. Its bright reddish orange berries would also provide winter interest and attract songbirds. But it can be really messy, and it is over the dining area. Maybe not the best choice. The existing deciduous tree located here in the lower right-hand corner will provide partial shade for the sitting area. Mixed native shrubs and small evergreen trees here would provide screening along the rear fence. In this scenario, the grill and the smoker are both protected from the prevailing wind. The approach is budget friendly, but irrigating the ground cover between the flagstones will be challenging. It's helpful to have an image to capture the feel of the intent of the design and space. This is a very simple idea for a small yard, which makes it easier to find photos of images that capture the intent of the design. The second concept is a DIY or do-it-yourself budget-friendly approach. The family can do some of the installation or hire a professional. The simple rectangular pavers and rectangular layout are easy to install with fewer paver cuts. The plants and irrigation are all contained at the rear perimeter. The arborist reported the leaning tree is stable, so it's going to stay. A pergola, which is hard to see here, but you can see these little words that say post. It's very light and gray here, will provide shade for the seating area. The pergola is shown with light gray lines over the top of the furniture. The furniture is positioned between the pergola posts, and the layout provides maximum usability for seating, dining, and fire pit. This image conveys the idea that a pergola or overhead structure will provide a shady sitting area while screening the view of the surrounding homes. The family can see that the space will be inviting within their small garden space. This idea is a winner. Step 4, time to develop the design. When the concept is approved, it is time to develop and refine it further to make sure the various elements are working together, are identified, and coordinated. When a design is fully developed, it includes a landscape plan, a planting plan, an irrigation plan. Sometimes projects also need a grading and drainage plan, a stormwater management plan, and a lighting plan. Sometimes civil engineers will provide the grading and drainage plan and the stormwater management plan on projects when needed. The landscape plan defines layout, location, materials, and dimensions. The landscape plan is a map of the overall layout of the yard. The yard is laid out with different uses for each area. Uses are things like storage, play area, dog run, raised beds, things like that. The landscape plan defines locations of hardscaped areas, like patios, decks, paths, and boulders. The materials for the space are indicated by type, size, and color. Preferences for imported soil, mulch, and compost are also noted. The height and width of berms or mounds of soil are shown. The advantage of working on computer is I can overlay the planting plan and the irrigation plan to coordinate sprinkler head placement to avoid plants blocking the irrigation spray. Landscape lighting locations are also added to the plan along with sleeving and conduit locations for future irrigation and low voltage wire. Speaking of landscape lighting, in some areas of Central Oregon, lighting is required to be dark night sky compliant. This means landscape lighting should be fully shielded, down lighting where there is no bulb or light source visible to the viewer. The intention of this directive is to preserve our view of the night sky so we can gaze at the stars when sitting around our fire pits and hanging out in our hot tubs. Are we finally talking about plants? Now that the plan is fully developed, refined, and detailed, we can finally start seriously thinking about plant selection. Now we can see what is needed to achieve the goals of privacy screening and selecting native plants that will not outgrow the space. Plant availability varies by the season. Consider what plants will actually be available at the time of installation. For instance, summer and fall blooming perennials are often not available in spring, or if they are, they're not looking their best because they are coming out of dormancy later than spring bloomers. Nurseries, especially retail nurseries, typically carry plants that are retail ready and looking their best, ready to bloom or in bloom. Conifers and many deciduous trees are dug in the spring, February and March. So we're talking about big trees here, like big shade trees, big evergreen trees, and they're balled and burlapped. They're only available until the inventory is sold out and will not be readily available later in the season. If the plant is in high demand, you will need to order it a year ahead. Nurseries order plants, shrubs, and trees the summer before they offer them for sale. Speaking of native plants, they can be tricky on a small project like this one. The goal was for native evergreen screening that grew taller than 6 feet but would not outgrow the limited narrow space. The family wanted to see the plants tall enough to screen for privacy in their lifetime. Oregon grape was not tall enough. Curly-leaf mountain mahogany could work, but was only available in small sizes, and they are slow growing. So we settled on a compromise, using a subalpine native slow-growing conifer, but it would need to be maintained with careful pruning of the new growth. Conifers are not considered a fire-wise choice, but in real life, sometimes we make the best choice we can, and in this case, we chose it for year-round screening. Privacy fencing is typically built with wood, but a fire-wise option is something that will not burn or will burn very slowly. Ipe is a beautiful wood that has Class A fire rating. That means it burns about the same rate as concrete. This fence is built with steel and pebbles and provides another durable, non-ignitable option. When it comes to plant selection, an accurate source for your area matters. OSU Extension has great online reference guides, which can be cross-referenced with nursery information and observing what is surviving at your neighbors. This is the best way to find what plants work. When designing irrigation, consider what is a good match for the type of plantings and the density of plantings, especially ground cover and perennial beds. This small area on this project we're looking at can be irrigated with either drip irrigation or traditional underground pop-up spray irrigation. Both will work. This example shows a traditional pop-up spray zone with 5-foot, you can see over here I've got them designated 5-foot and 8-foot spray nozzles, which use 3.64 gallons per minute and puts down 1.5 inches of precipitation per hour. So the nozzles are dictated by the width of the bed or the depth of the bed. If I used 5-foot stream bubblers, instead it would use 18 gallons per minute and would likely require 2 zones or valves, which is expensive and overkill for the tiny space. So remember when I said that most residential meters are good up to 15 gallons per minute. Some can go beyond 15, but typically it's 15 gallons per minute or less. Drip irrigation would use 1.5 gallons, not per minute, but per hour. So it's putting water down much slower. The pop-up sprays will cover the space evenly, which is ideal for the dense ground cover. The bubblers will also cover the space evenly with water, but put water down so fast that the soil cannot absorb it without it running off. Drip irrigation will water the plants adequately around their root system when installed, but may need to be modified to adequately irrigate as the plants grow and mature. Installing drip irrigation on top of the ground avoids trenching around existing tree roots, but can be unsightly until the plants mature. If there are dogs or deer in the area regularly, they have a tendency to kick the drip lines and pull them apart. Also, there is a big difference between how much irrigation is needed for riparian native plants, which grow near water, versus dryland native plants, which grow in the desert. Dryland native plants will survive without supplemental water once they're established, but may dry out during drought and not look great and become a fire hazard without any additional water. Riparian native plants need enough water to mimic their natural growing conditions, which is near moisture, at least during the spring and early summer. There is no perfect solution. It's worth exploring what the pros and cons are of each type of irrigation and what type of maintenance to expect. Step 5, make a materials list. Developing the design provides the information needed to make a materials list. A materials list includes a list of plants, their name, their quantity, and size. It also identifies hardscape material, things like retaining walls, flagstone, pavers, decomposed granite, gravel, rocks, and boulders. What's their size? What's their type? What's color? Are they locally sourced? It also clarifies softscape, things like berms, swales, soil amendments, mulch, and compost. Amenities like pergola, sauna, hot tub, greenhouse, raised bed, play structures, and fences also need to be shown. And finally, infrastructure, power requirements, conduits, piping, and sleeves for irrigation are added. Step 6, get estimates. With a complete materials list, it's now possible to get estimates. A well-developed landscape plan with complete materials list ensures your estimates will be comparable. It also makes your project highly desirable to bid and install, which leads to more competitive bids. When deciding on whether to install it yourself or hire a professional, consider this. Is your labor worth more landscaping or more working at your regular job? Are you regularly physically working outside for long hours, bending, pulling, and lifting? Do you have the level of experience needed to install your landscaping? How much will you really save if you do it yourself? When we are discussing doing it yourself, we also discuss staging, timing, and phases. We'll discuss the cost of all time and materials, including rented equipment, delivery fees, the time and gas to go get materials. Do you have a truck or a trailer for hauling? Do you have time to research how-to resources? Do you have enough beer for your neighbors stopping by to help? And will you have to take time off work to visit the chiropractor and the masseuse? Professionally installed may seem expensive, but designers match the skill set and the size of the crew to the project when requesting bids. Each bidder has the same set of drawings and materials list to ensure comparable estimates. A few estimates are ideal if installers are available. Winter is the best time to get bids. The cost of professional install is mostly labor and is about 50% more than a do-it-yourself. Special amenities are more, including pools, water feature, lighting, masonry, etc. Those definitely cost more than 50% of doing it yourself. But in the end, it is faster and better with fewer backaches. Where am I here? Step 7, schedule the install. A project can be scheduled when the plan is fully developed along with the materials list and the bid, when the bid has been accepted. A sequence of phases is the same on most projects. The first phase is always demo or demolition, site preparation, and grading. This is when they bring in soil and boulders and do all of the grading on the site. The second thing they'll do is hardscaping, sleeving, adding utilities, and the infrastructure. Hardscaping being pavers, concrete, flagstone. Third is irrigation. Irrigation is tied into a main line downstream of the meter, not to a hose bib. Drip irrigation is tied into a main line with backflow device, shutoff, and valves underground, even though the drip line itself is above ground. Next is amenities like water features or fire pits. And the last steps are planting and mulching. Remember, planning and design need to be scheduled at least a year prior to the preferred installation date. Schedule installers up to a year ahead. Planting is ideal late spring and fall. The ground needs to be thawed to install irrigation and hardscaping like pavers. Step 8, construction. Yay, this is what we've been waiting for. This is the before photo of their little backyard, and this is the after photo. The owner and his 2 preteen girls assembled their pergola kit over a weekend and sent me this photo when it was completed. The pavers and irrigation were professionally installed. The owners planted some of the smaller shrubs and ground covers, and the trees were installed professionally. However, they had not been installed yet when this photo was taken. So, 8 steps. Now you know, if you follow these 8 steps, you will know where to plant next time you landscape. The 8 steps are gather information, draw a site plan, create a concept, develop the design, make a materials list, get an estimate, schedule the install, and finally, construction. Plants are like the sprinkles on the frosting of a cake. There is a lot of planning, design, and preparation that goes into a really scrumptious cake, just like there is designing a landscape. Decorating our yards with plants is what excites us, but we need a great cake to plant them in. I hope this webinar has taught you step by step how to design a truly thoughtful, delicious, and delightful landscape, including the sprinkles on top. Now I'll show you some before and after photos. The first one is a dirty, dusty dog yard over here, turned into a fun, frolic dog park using synthetic, pet-friendly turf that does not require water and is fire resistant. The second is an example of a restoration project using native dryland plantings. It shows how quickly native plants establish, but dryland natives are not considered firewise unless planted outside of the defensible space. This was done in 2008, so we weren't quite as worried about firewise then. This is a high water use, high maintenance lawn that was replaced with drought tolerant plantings and deer resistant plantings. However, this existing conifer at the corner was retained, but it is not firewise, and neither is the firewood stacked on the porch. The pine tree you can see off here in the corner was limbed up. Overall, the site does have improved defensible space, and life just isn't perfect. This narrow yard had a neighbor's second story window looking directly down into it, right down into their dining, living, and family space. It felt super exposed and uninviting. This landscape now provides a private, comfortable, and inviting area to hang out and entertain friends and family. It also blocks the neighbor's view, as you can see. This last one is a before photo of my place when we purchased it, and the after photo showing my landscape, which is now designed for hummingbirds. If you use this 8-step process before you bring plants home, you will be able to plant them with confidence, and you will have a beautiful, functional, and inviting outdoor space. As a Vulcan gardener once said, "May you and your garden grow live long, and prosper. Thank you. Now I'll answer your questions.
Wow, Chris. Oh my goodness. I learned so much. Oh gosh. Well,
Can I
we have several questions for you. And I love that photograph. That's great. So I'm going to start at the top because you mentioned fire pits several times. And so we've got some questions because you mentioned that you didn't use it outside anymore. And several people wanted to know why. And how should the landscaping be to safely have a fire pit outside?
Fire pits will depend on where you live. The fire pit that I showed you a picture of that's no longer in use is right up against a very dry native area that is not irrigated. They do allow wood burning fire pits if they have a tight screen over the top and a 20-foot area that is clear. But even with that, if you're in an area that's near a native dry area or near weeds like cheatgrass that have dried out in the middle of early or early summer, um, it's still very, very ignitable. So I have chosen not to burn mine because often the wind is blowing and it's just not safe given the space where mine is, which is right next to a dry native area. If you're in town, you're surrounded by grass and you're surrounded by other places that also have grass that are green and lush and growing, it would be safer. However, I simply don't put in wood burning fireplaces unless they're only going to be burnt in the winter when snow is on the ground. The clients now are putting in natural gas fired or propane fired fire pits because they don't spark and you can use them in the shoulder seasons safely.
So would that be Tony had said this was a follow-up question. She also had this question, and she's in a very native area. So would her question is would she design a safe fire pit?
Using propane.
Okay. Tony, I hope that answered your question. Let me see. I thought there might be, nope, we're good with that. So another attendee was curious to learn more about the pet play-friendly landscape design. This person's got two dogs and kids, and a desire for backyard beauty. This is a priority, and they wanted to know if you have any resources for that.
Let's see. Do I have resources for pet friendly?
Because
Um,
if you do, Chris, um, we can also send them out to all of the attendees after the webinar is over.
Um, you know, Nothing is actually coming to mind on that one. I mean, obviously, there's pet-friendly synthetic lawn, which is definitely a popular choice for smaller yards because it is kind of expensive. It's basically the same cost to put in synthetic turf as it is to put in pavers, for instance. So it's a higher cost item, but it doesn't require water or maintenance. And the only caution I have on it is that I don't put it underneath large pine trees that drip sap because it would be too hard to get it off the synthetic lawn. But other than that, depending on how old the kids are, how active the dogs are, there's a lot that goes into the design because if they're really active dogs and they're female dogs, they're going to be really hard on lawn. So then you might want to choose other choices. And if you're also worried about fire at the same time, typically I would go toward a crushed gravel or crushed granite, um, things that can hold up to both of those.
Okay. There were two sort of related questions. You had spent some time talking about the survey that uh, showed irrigation lines and things like that. So one person wanted to know where if you knew where they could find an already existing survey. And the follow-up to that was the city, do they retain construction plans for houses? And would those plans include irrigation design? Because their house was built in the last couple of years and they want to modify the backyard, but they don't know where the sprinkler lines might be.
Okay, so the sprinkler lines are usually put in by a landscaper. And if they knew who the landscaper was, they would be able to call them and see if they had a copy of the plan. For a site survey, that's something totally different. That would be if you can go back to the developer, they would have a site survey. The builder would have a site for survey, and the city also has a site survey. I just haven't figured out what they're doing with them because they used to put them in their development planning section of Dial, and they're not there anymore. So I'm not sure where they're hiding them. But you can often go back to a builder or a developer and get a copy of that fairly easily.
Okay, great. Thank you. Autumn wants to know how much your design cost was for the small yard example that you used.
The design cost or the cost of installing it? Because the design
Well,
wasn't very much.
it just design cost was the question.
It was probably under $2,000. And to tell you the truth, I don't remember how much it was, but that included guidance through the construction process. It was a really small yard, so.
Okay, yes. So Molly wants to know which of the 8 steps would you say are best to get professional support with, as opposed to DIY?
I would say a homeowner can do most of the information gathering. Um, they can even do their own site plan, call the utility companies. They just have to be accurate. They need to be accurate and they need to be observant and really include all those things I had on the list. If they do that, that saves time that the designer would have to spend doing it. A designer will still need to show up on site and walk it and really get a feel for it. But that's something the homeowner can definitely do is all those first items in step one. As far as the thing that's probably most helpful is going from concept to a what I call buildable drawing or design development, which is really the one that makes it buildable. So it gives more of the details and information, things that either a do-it-yourselfer is going to need or an installer is going to need.
So, and I would also think that depending on what your specific situation is, physically, financially, where you are, some things you might be able to do yourself, but other things might be better to have a professional do some of the installation.
Yes. So like the one we looked at as an example, the professional did the pavers, which was a really good choice. But the
Mhm.
dad and his two girls put together the pergola in a weekend and they thought, oh, it's going to be too hard. I don't think we can do it. But you know what? They
They did.
knocked it out of the ballpark.
There you go. Okay, so Jan wants to know if you have any ideas for vegetative windscreen in an area that is not irrigated.
Vegetative windscreen that is not irrigated.
I'm
Uh,
not quite sure what she means by vegetative windscreen, but
she means something that's growing versus a structural
okay.
element. So even our dryland native plants need water to get established. So I can't think of anything um, that would successfully, for sure, grow and establish without a little help um, for at least a couple of years to get going. And then it also depends on whether they need it year-round screening, so something evergreen, or if it can be deciduous. But from a standpoint of like what is really super drought tolerant, most of it is what you see in our high desert already. So curly mountain mahogany would potentially be a um, something that could grow without long-term watering that gets tall enough. It's like 12, 15 feet tall. Um, Obviously, juniper and ponderosa pine fit the bill. But it really depends on where they are, because if you're west, near the closer to the mountains, ponderosa pine is going to be more likely to establish. And if you're out toward Bend Airport or Prineville, juniper is going to be something that's going to be a better choice, or curly mountain mahogany. So it depends on where you live.
Okay. Like always, most
Likewise.
burning questions are, well, it depends. Okay.
It depends. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends. Okay, so another attendee, this is a timing question. If the homeowner uses a professional to help them with their landscape, the question is, at what point is payment required? There's a lot of work that's involved in the first 5 steps prior to getting an estimate. So does the homeowner pay for those steps, and does the homeowner usually get to keep the design?
That varies a lot depending on who you're working with. If you're working with a designer that their focus is design and not installation, then you would be paying the designer for the design and the installer for the estimate and the rest of it. Now, a designer can often come up with like just a really rough ballpark estimate for parts and pieces of a project, but pricing has been really volatile lately. And so I don't even try to do that anymore. I don't even try to price anymore because I can't keep up with the volatility of the pricing. Um, so if you're going to go with a design build team, like a landscape company that has their own crew and they're going to come in and they're just going to design it for you and install it for you, the process will probably be streamlined and you won't have as much say, or they'll probably just like tell you what they think you should do versus really finding out what is going to fit your needs. It's a different process. So some people are like, oh, okay, you think I should put a tree there and put some lawn there, and okay, that sounds good, and they'll just go along with it. Where with a designer, it's really more of a soul search. It's really, what do you really want out of this? How long are you going to live in that house? You know, what works for you now may not work for you long term. So it's a much more client-centered approach.
And once the design is done, does the homeowner get to keep that design?
With a designer, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. A couple more questions, and I'm minding the clock here. Um, uh, One of the attendees wants to know if you could briefly discuss how the process changes when it's spread out in multiple phases over a number of years.
Okay, ask me that again. Say that again, Vicki.
And how does the process change if it's spread out in multiple phases over a number of years?
So it depends. It
Of
depends on
course.
it depends on whether the project was all designed at one time and it's being implemented over years, or if part of it was designed and that was implemented, but then the next phase was designed. Um, Typically, most clients find that they want a master plan, so they have some idea of where they want to end up, even if it's phased over a long period of time. If they have an end goal and they can see it and they can see it on a plan, then we can figure out how to actually get there. Um, and that works well for large
Mhm.
projects where, it's multiple phases and multiple designs and so on. But for the average homeowner that's just dealing with their yard, um, they may have different stages where like maybe they only have so much money, but in reality, like certain things have to happen first. So, if you're not going to be able to get to a space after you do something to it and you can't get back to it to do the next thing, then that thing has to be completed in the first phase. So that equipment access thing. Access is huge. People really don't realize how big a deal access is. Um, and then as far as like how a designer works into that, typically a designer would just follow along as each phase is implemented. And then sometimes the homeowner feels really comfortable working with the installer, and the installer feels really comfortable with the design, and they just kind of roll with it on their own and make changes as they go. So it can look a lot of different ways.
Okay, one's not a question, but Janet had to leave and she said, thank you for such an informative webinar. So I second that. Uh, Another attendee would like to know if you could name a couple of plants. We've got about 10 minutes left. This is great. If you could name a couple of plants for parking strips that could hold up to frequent dog urine if I remove my grass. That's such a common problem. And the plants, in my parking strip, I have no grass and the dogs just pee all over the plants, but they seem to survive.
That's great. What do you have in your parking strip?
I've got catmint in my parking strip. I've got some lavender in my parking strip. I've got uh, lamb's ears. I've got daffodil bulbs. I've got mostly catmint, and
Catmint.
it
Catmint's
seems
awesome.
it seems to withstand the doggy urine. But this person wants to know what they could plant if they
Okay.
wanted to take out the grass because of the dog pee.
So, as Vicky said, catmint is like my go-to for any tough situation because it's like it's a mint. I mean, you almost can't kill it. It's amazing. So it just needs sun and water, and not a lot of water, just enough water. But I think one of my favorite things to do with dog dogs and planting strips is one of two things. I either bring in boulders and plants, snuggle them right up around the boulders and leave open space in between like groups of boulders and plantings that's like a gravel or grit or something that the dog can use to relieve themselves. And it also works well for people crossing over the planting area a lot. Like if they're parked at the curb and they're walking over to the sidewalk, it allows for a lot of ways to get to the sidewalk without stepping on plants. So that's one way I deal with it. And then another way I deal with it is to raise beds where I just get the plants up off the ground so the dog isn't peeing on them. So that works really well.
Um, just on a related note there, Molly commented that we have a neighbor with a parking strip full of cacti, and that seems to deter the dogs. And I guess that probably
That's a
would.
good one. Yeah.
But yeah, and for those of you who are interested in cacti, that's our afternoon session. So thank you, Molly, for that. That's much appreciated. And also, two more questions. Um, this hopefully is a quick one. And Brenda, I'm going to get to you in just a second, but Victoria wants to know if you can recommend any books on beginning landscape design. And if whatever it is, if you have anything, we can also send that out to all of our attendees after the webinar.
Mm. Um, I don't actually. I have all sorts of books, but I don't have anything like specifically on beginning landscape design, but I bet the library does.
So Landscape 101. All
Hmm.
right, this is the last question, and it's from Brenda. She says she lives in a fishbowl in Northeast Bend on lava rock. She kills everything except her juniper trees. Her lilac bush has barely held on for 15 years. That's a pretty good haul, but won't grow any more than about 5 feet tall. Are there taller trees, bushes that can live in pots or raised beds, something to get over the 6 foot fence?
There are some, you can get big pots, something that's like 30 inches across, 30 inches high. So it's got weight when when it's got soil in it, it's going to need some weight so that when the wind is pushing against a taller tree or shrub, that just the pure physics of it doesn't flip it over. So you would need large containers that are kind of heavy. And you can do what I call large shrubs or small trees. So it depends on whether it's full sun and windy or kind of protected and shady. But some of the smaller maples like Amur or Janella maple will grow in the sun and be perfectly happy in a container. A lot of the larger shrubs, like even the lilac or red twig dogwood or viburnum, there's so many big shrubs that are really cool that would do great in a container. And nurseries also have some specialty things that have been grafted. So they may have like a trunk, but they may have like a shrub on top of that trunk. So it might be something that's 8 feet tall at maturity, 10 feet tall, something like that, but definitely would not outgrow a small space. So all of those are options. Really, it just comes down to you don't want a big tall tree in a container. It needs to be something that's going to stay under like 10 feet tall.
Awesome. Well, Chris, that was our last question. So I am going to close out this webinar for today, and I'd like to thank everybody who's still on for participating. And I also would like to note that your feedback helps us improve our webinars. So when you get the survey, we would really appreciate it if you would answer the questions because we rely on your feedback and your comments to help make these webinars even better the next time around. And it's just very, very important. And I would really like to thank Chris for all of her insights and her knowledge and her wisdom because I learned a lot, and I know many of you also did. And this is just another aspect of gardening in the high desert. So thank you, Chris, and thanks to my colleagues online, Sarah and Deborah, and to all of our participants. So happy Easter Passover weekend. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to end this for everybody. So we're good, everybody, and we're going to sign off. So good night and good luck and have a wonderful day.